Welcome to Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean. What we have for you today is a continuation of me going through the front end of my new Brodozer 85 Toyota 4Runner and tightening everything up. We recently got done going through the whole front axle, doing new bearings for the hubs, new bearings for the knuckles, all the associated seals. Everything is dialed there. At the end of that two-part video, I talked about how I noticed that the U-bolts for the leaf springs were way under torqued, and that was the cause of my death wobble, at least most of it. To take it one step further, in this video, I want to replace all the poly bushings for the whole leaf spring. The connection of the leaf spring to the front, the leaf spring to the shackle, and then the shackle to the frame. There's 6 bushings per side, so a total of 12 bushings. I ordered the bushings through Trail Gear because those are the bushings that were installed last time. So let me show you the bushings we got for this job. We have 4 poly bushings for the shackle connections to the frame. Then we have 8 poly bushings for the leaf springs. 4 of them are going to attach the leaf spring to the lower part of the shackle, and then the other 4 are going to be the bushings that connect the front of the leaf springs to the frame. Here's how we have things set up to do this job. I have a jack underneath the front axle, basically at the center point to where both tires will be lifted up equally. I have some big heavy duty jack stands that are supporting on both sides, and I have them underneath my rock rails. These jack stands that I bought from Sunix, they are a 10-ton jack stand, and I bought these jack stands because of how high they will go. The lowest setting is about 28 inches and it'll go up to, I think, as much as 46 inches. So they are kind of overkill, but I was kind of limited on what type of jack stands will actually go this high. This seemed like a good way to go, so that's why I bought them. They're super heavy. The paired together are about 110 pounds. So if you haven't been pumping iron, you probably don't want to buy these because they're freaking heavy. And behind each of my rear tires, I have a chock. We're in my driveway, which is a slight slant downhill, so I got the rear tires chocked just in case. The parking brake is on and the transmission is in gear. Okay, I'm gonna grab my impact gun and I'm gonna get the wheels off. With the tires off, now I'm gonna lower the jack stand underneath the axle, and basically what I want to do is take tension off the leaf springs. Right now with it jacked up, the leaf springs are kind of sprung. So I'm going to lower it down and hopefully I'll be able to get it low enough to where the axle is just hanging by the leaf spring and I'm really not holding any weight on the axle. Let's see how it goes. I'm going to go really slow. You can see now that I can move the jack. All the weight is on the leaf springs. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to tighten it up and make contact with it, but not really lift it up. So right there, I've got a little bit of pressure on it, and so that's where I want it. Okay, the tools I have for this job is I have a big, long flex head, 1/2-inch drive ratchet. I have a 27mm socket, and then I have a large 27mm open end wrench or box end wrench. An SAE 1 1/16 is also really close, so if you don't have a 27mm socket, you can use a 1 1/16. You can use a 1 1/16 open end wrench also, or you could just use an adjustable wrench. You'll notice I'm using a fair amount of force to get the bolt and the nut all the way off. And that's because the nut is a locking nut. And the reason for that is that you can't just bring this to a very high torque spec and think the nut is not gonna come loose. Because these have these poly bushings, you're only supposed to tighten them till you start to squeeze the bushing a little bit and then call it good. So that's why it has a lock nut. You don't have to get it really tight for the nut to not be able to come off. You also notice that these are greasable because this bolt has grease holes in the middle of it, so you can grease it without having to disassemble it to put new grease in. The nut is off. You could kind of see how it's shaped. It's got flatter sides. It's not perfectly round. It's like oblong. That's the locking portion of the nut. It's not perfectly round, so it kind of clamps onto the bolt. Just push this out. It's a little bit of tension on it still, and not a whole lot. And there we go. The reason why that came out so easily is because we basically don't have the leaf spring under tension right now. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lower the axle a little bit further so the leaf spring comes down a little bit so I can get the bushings out. It's gonna go nice and slow. I think that's about as far as it's gonna go. Yep, that's as far as it's gonna go. But you can see I got enough room to work and I can clear the bushings out of there. I'm just gonna get a regular flathead screwdriver and just kind of get in there and start prying out a little bit. Okay, there's one side. So you can see on this side, because the axle is tilted towards the passenger side, I have to get this down a little bit more to clear the bushing. So I just got a big pry bar. I'm gonna lever against the frame and then I can work it out. So with the bushing out and the bolt in my hand, I slide it into the old bushing. Look at all that slop. As you're four-wheeling and the front end's articulating, there's strain on the bushing and it just ends up ovalizing it out. One thing that we did notice on the other side is that the replacement bushing doesn't really fit as tight as you would hope for in the front end of this leaf spring. I'll slide one of the new ones in, and actually this one fits a little bit tighter than the other side. Well, this bushing is about 29.8, and when I measured the inner diameter of the leaf spring on the driver's side, I came up with 30.6. So somehow this circle expanded a little bit, or maybe it was like that from day one. So the bushing just has a tiny bit of play, 0.8 millimeters of play, which isn't ideal, but I mean, it is what it is. Unless I can get a custom bushing, this is what I'm stuck with. I noticed on this side, this fits nice and tight. It's pretty close to the diameter of the bushing. When I stick this one on the other side, there's just a tiny bit more play. This spring is a little bit tighter on this side as opposed to the opposite side. But guaranteed, it's gonna be a big improvement over this. With all that slop, that's like 3 or 4 millimeters of slop. So the next step is I'm gonna clean up all these parts really good with some brake cleaner and a brush, get all the old grease off and the grime. Whatever grease the previous owner was using, I don't know, it's kind of a black grease. I'm gonna use a grease called Super Lube. It's a food-based grease and it's meant for poly bushings, so that's what I'm gonna use as a lubricant. I just sprayed it with a little bit of brake clean. I have a little wire brush. I'm gonna clean out the threads a little bit, and I'm just gonna wipe all the old grime off the bolt and the nut. Here's a better shot of what the lock nut looks like. You can see how oval it looks, and that is what enables it to lock onto the bolt really tight, and so it can't come loose on you and fall off and cause a catastrophic failure and ruin your day. Okay, I got the bolt and the nut cleaned up really good. The next step, what I have to do is I'm gonna hook up my grease gun that's filled with the Super Lube, and Sean's gonna help me. I'm gonna basically clear out the shaft of this bolt of all the old grease. I'm holding the grease gun against the zerk fitting, and then Sean's gonna start pumping. See the old grease popping out the dark stuff. Okay, it looks like it's coming up pretty clear on that first one. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna block up the lower one to force grease out of the top one. So I'm blocking it with my thumb. Go ahead, Sean. Okay, that's coming out pretty clean. I'll call that good. So now the greasable bolt is filled with Super Lube, and all the old grease has been squished out. Now I'm gonna grab the two new bushings and I'm gonna put some Super Lube on the inside. When it comes to bushings, you wanna lubricate the inside where the shaft of the bolt's gonna be pivoting on. You don't wanna lubricate this side because you don't want the bushing turning inside the leaf spring. You want the bolt turning inside the inner diameter of the bushing. And another dead giveaway where you need to grease is this has little slots in it, and those slots are there to hold the lubricant. Get your finger in there, you fill up all those little slots with lubricant, and then you're good to go. Okay, both bushings are greased up really good. Now I'm gonna slide them into the leaf spring. just like I got the bushings out, I'm going to use the pry bar to pry down a little bit to give me some space. I'm going to slide one in on the inside, and then I'm going to slide one in on the outside. So right now the leaf spring is kind of tilted a little bit and not giving me enough room to be able to jack this up into place. So I'm going to use both my hands. I've got a shorter pry bar. I'm going to pry against the frame and the leaf spring to bring it over this way just a little bit while I jack up on the jack. There we go. The bushing's now behind this frame member, so now I don't need the pry bar anymore, and I'll just jack this up into place. I'll just go slow, looking for the proper alignment. It looks like it's pretty aligned right now. I also put a little bit of the super lube on the shaft of the bolt. Let's see if I can get this started. There it goes in. On this opposite side, it's not perfectly lining up yet. I'll use the pry bar a little bit. Go up or down? Oh, it actually lined up. There it is. It's through. Just going to put my nut on the opposite side. Now I'm going to tighten it up. There's no torque spec for this. I'm just going to get it snug to where I see a little bit of pressure on the bushing, and then I'm going to call it good. That's pretty snug. I'm going to call that good. In the rear we have a shackle. This is actually made by Trail Gear, and just like the front, the bottom and the top are greasable, same type of bolt, and they are the same size. They are 27 millimeter. So I'm going to loosen the bottom connection first that attaches the leaf spring to the shackle, and then after that's loose, I'll attack the top connection to the frame. Okay, the nut's off. See if I can push this through. There's still a little tension on this bolt, so I probably have to lower the front axle just a little bit more. Nope, that didn't do it. Okay, go up. Put a little more tension on it. Keep going. There we go. I found that there was some tension on the bolt, so I got Sean onto the jack. He lowered it down a little bit, and it was still tight. So then he started jacking underneath it, slowly raising it up while I was putting pressure on the bolt. As soon as he got it to the sweet spot, it moved a little bit, letting me know that's where it needs to be. So I'm just going to pull this bolt out. You saw these two sleeves drop down. These go on either side of the bushing, just like this. Now I'm just going to take a flat edge screwdriver and I'm going to get behind the bushing. You can see that one was torn a little bit, and get this thing pulled out. If the bushing is fighting you coming out just with your hand strength, you could go on the opposite side and catch the inside lip with the screwdriver and pop it out. There we go. I think it's out enough now. So you can see how this one was torn. Basically, that sleeve was pushing up maybe a little too hard against it and cut the bushing. Now I'm going to get the other side out. Same thing, I'm going to go from the inside and knock it out. Okay, and you could see that the other one was torn pretty bad too. Maybe just a little bit too much tightness with the bolt and the sleeves going up against there. It tore it. So now I'm going to disconnect the bolt that attaches the shackle to the frame. Okay, the nut's off. The inside shackle's off. And now I'm going to push the bolt through the frame. Pull it out. Try to. There we go. And then we have the bolt with the outside shackle. Now we got to get the bushings out. I'm going to use my screwdriver again. Get in between the bushing and the frame. Pry out a little bit. Try to get some movement. I think what I'm going to do is do the technique I did before. It seems to work better. Just come and catch the inside lip and get the bushing knocked out. Okay, I got the inside one out. Now I'm going to come from the opposite side and push this one out. There we go. And I got this one out. Again, you could see that there's a little bit of damage. It's torn a little bit. It was a good idea. I decided to replace these. So now we're going to clean everything up. We're not going to bother showing it because you don't need to see me using brake cleaner and cleaning parts up. I know you can handle that without watching me. Okay, all the parts are cleaned up. We did the same with these greasable bolts that we did with the front. We squeezed some of the super lube in here until we saw it coming out of both these holes, evacuating all the old grease out of here. And now I'm going to lubricate the shaft a little bit with the super lube. Do the other side. And now we're going to load up the inside diameter of each bushing with a little bit of super lube. So I'm going to grab my 2 poly bushings that are labeled frame tube, and I'm going to slide them into the frame. Remember, no grease on this surface, only on the inside. So slide them in. They go in fairly tight, which is a good thing. I wish the ones that went into the leaf spring were a little bit tighter fit. It's a little bit tight to get it in there, so I'm going to tap it in with the plastic mallet. The outside one is in. Now I'll get the inside one. Okay, I got both bushings bottomed out on the frame. Now I have to get my bolt and shackle in place. So just by looking at the shackle, you can see where the bolt was going and the side that was going towards the bushing. So I'm going to keep it in the same orientation. So I'm going to slide the bolt in from the outside, capture the first shackle, and then go into the bushing. Same thing. This side was obviously towards the bushing. This side had the nut on it, so I'm going to put it in the same orientation. Now I just got to get my lock nut in place. And for right now, I'm just going to keep that hand tight. I'm not even going to tighten it with the wrench yet. I'm just going to leave it pretty loose. The next bushings we're going to get in are labeled leaf spring, and we're going to slide them into each side of the leaf spring. Just like the front leaf spring on the driver's side, I noticed that there's a little bit of play in here, and what I guess maybe happens over time is this leaf spring can maybe expand out from flexing over and over again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually check out a local shop that works on leaf springs and ask them if they can maybe put this in a machine and clamp it a little bit to reduce the diameter so the bushings fit a little tighter. As you can see, that's going to offer a little bit of play, and it would be nice to not have that much play. The other side fits a little bit tighter. For some reason, there's more torque on this outside part of the leaf spring, basically elongating the hole a little bit, widening it out. So now what we have to do is we have to jack up the front axle a little bit. I'll let Sean work the jack and I'll tell him when to stop. A little bit more. Stop right there. So I'm going to now get my spacer in between the bushing and the shackle. And then I'm going to get my bolt going through the two. On the opposite side, I'm going to slide the bushing on. Okay, it's all captured. Now I'm just going to get my lock nut on. Just like the other side, I'm going to cinch these up snug, but not too tight to where it's really deforming the poly bushing. And I actually get my head in here in line with the bushings to get a better look at what's happening as I tighten. So I'm looking for the sleeves to start pushing on the bushing. I'm feeling for how tight things are getting with the wrench. That's snugged up pretty good. I'm going to stop right there. Now that all the bushings are replaced, we're going to get our tires back on. I'm going to need to jack up the front axle high enough to where I can get the tires on. Think that's probably high enough. All right, we're all done with this job. As you saw, it's not too complicated. You just have to get the leaf springs unsprung to where there's not a lot of tension on them, so you can loosen the nut, push the bolt out, get the bushings out, clean everything up, lubricate the new bushings, install them, get the bolt, the nut back in, and then you just tighten them snug to where you see the bushings start to get squeezed on, but not really majorly deformed. Since these bushings are greasable because of the system that Trailgear came up with the greasable bolt, I would say I'm probably going to grease these every other oil change. I'm doing oil changes every 5,000 miles, so maybe every 10,000 miles I'm going to shoot some fresh grease in there and not over pump it, because you could deform the bushings if you go too crazy. Give each one a couple pumps and probably that's going to be sufficient. With the new leaf spring bushings, I can now say that everything on the front end of my rig is now pretty darn tight, and I feel pretty confident that if I go off-roading with it, nothing's gonna fail on me. The front end's gonna be really tight. It's gonna perform well also under road conditions. I'm glad I went ahead and did this because, as you saw in the video, the bushings were pretty wasted and they were due to be changed. With all that said, thank you for watching Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean. We'll be back with more videos. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. If you have any questions or comments, do that below. Take care. Bye-bye. Sick mods, sick bro dozers, and sick rock crawling.